Hello, everyone. Cecil Martin here.
Hey, this is Hunter Henry.
What's up, man? This is Max Crosby, part of Raider Nation.
Hey, this is Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman.
Hey, it's Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks.
Hey, this is Jerry Judah, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, and you're listening to the 14-Yard NFL Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Full 10 Yards NFL podcast. I am your host Sam Moores and this is our Week 16 recap. Merry Christmas everyone, I hope you had a very good Christmas, and today we're going to be recapping both the games from Christmas Day but also the games from Christmas Eve before that, because we had a full slate on Christmas Eve followed by 3 games on Christmas Day, a couple of them that shook up the NFL as well. But we will start with the game of the one of the game of the years. Yeah, one of the games of the year, surely, and obviously the game of Christmas Eve between the Dallas Cowboys and the Miami Dolphins. It was a battle of two 10-4 teams, but two teams who hadn't really beaten anyone proper, especially the Cowboys away from home this year. And it was Miami who got the job done at home, thanks to Jason Sanders, who was the hero for the Dolphins, finally beating a team with a winning record. Obviously, the 10-4 Cowboys being a good team to beat with a winning record too, and obviously securing their spot with a win over the Cowboys. Spot in the playoffs with a win over the Cowboys as well. It's their 4th straight winning record, their 2nd straight postseason visit too, and obviously fingers crossed, touch wood, Tua Tagovailoa will play in his first preseason game and get through his first full NFL season too. Jason Sanders hit 5 field goals, including a career-long 57-yarder and 2 more over 50 yards as the Dolphins edged out the Cowboys as time expired. And that's a very good day for a kicker who has struggled the rest of the last 2 years since his All-Pro season a couple of years ago. He made 4 50-yard field goals out of 12 the last 2 years, and he made 3 in this game. So, he came up big when needed. The Dolphins now move to 11-4 ahead of the massive clash with the AFC 1 seed in Baltimore next week. Win that and they're looking good. They have a chance at getting the 1 seed ahead of the final game against the Bills. Win that against the Baltimore Ravens next week. They win the Division 2, they win the AFC East. And then again, they've got a chance of having the AFC flowing through Miami too. They were without Jalen Waddle for a lot of this win as well. He struggled to run, and they also struggled to run the ball as well. So it was a lot of Sanders kicking the field goals. They did prove the critics wrong, winning a close game, quite physically too. But we'll get into that on Friday, just how physical the team the Dolphins are, which is quite an unpopular opinion. Without the favourable hot weather as well. It was raining at points in this game. So there was no advantage there, which they've had for a lot of the games this season. But it wasn't the offence that stood out, it was the defence. Their defence was absolutely excellent in this one. Quite surprisingly, actually, the defence that stood out was the Dolphins' defence. With that being said, the Cowboys' defence clearly aren't the same team and same unit, especially away from AT&T Stadium, Jerry World home. The questions still remain about the Cowboys. They're now 3-5 on the road this year, and due to the Eagles having an easier schedule, as well as obviously winning last night on Christmas Day, they're likely to be on the road all the way through the playoffs. So for the Cowboys, this was a really heartbreaking loss for them. It felt like this was the Cowboys team that was different. It felt like this would be the team that would win the Super Bowl, and they still could. Maybe they're a little bit better, but it's going to be difficult again because they're on the road again, and that is a real problem for them. It's certainly the best Dak Prescott has looked in his career. I think he's been awesome. For me, he's been the best quarterback this year, I'd say, maybe other than Josh Allen. He's been quite valuable to his team. But I don't think he's an MVP, but I think he's played very well, especially at the end of the game, that drive. He had a very impressive drive, marching down the field to take the lead with 3 minutes left to go. And he coped well under pressure all game too. The Dolphins' defensive line were all over the Cowboys' offensive line, missing Tyron Smith. And that was also against his Dolphins defense, who has been, have been number one in a lot of categories this year. They're getting sacks of Bradley Chubb, Andrew Van Ginkel, many other players, Zach Sealer and Christian Wilkins in the inside, and this is without Jalen Phillips too. That was really impressive. And but unfortunately for Dallas, it just he wasn't to be. The Cowboys defense played well against Miami's run game, and they frustrated Tua's timing to an extent. He wasn't bad by any means. Tua wasn't. He was good. In fact, again, it comes down to a fact where if that's a bad game for Tua, then that shows how much of a good season he's had, because he threw for 200 yards, touchdown, and he wasn't as accurate, but he still made a lot of throws. Obviously, that big 50-yarder to Jalen Waddle, and Tyreek Hill went 9 for 99 yards, even when he didn't really have much of an impact. So just shows how good that Dolphins offense is. But it was a Dolphins defense that won this game. They were just so much better, especially situationally, than Dallas. They had basically a goal line stop on 4th down. And that was probably at the start of the game, and that probably was what won the game for the Dolphins. But they managed to hang on, their defense was just excellent. But they now go to Baltimore, trying to hunt down the 1 seed. We'll see how that goes next week. We'll preview it on Friday. But they unfortunately will probably be without Jalen Waddle, who has a high ankle sprain. We'll see how he goes throughout the week and how he practices on Wednesday. But probably on Thursday and Friday. But it probably looks like Jalen Waddle will miss that game. Luckily for Miami, they've shown that they can win without Tyreek Hill. I expect they probably can win without Jalen Waddle. I think they'll be looking to get the run game going against the Ravens, which they couldn't do in this one. But they won a physical game, and I think a lot of people are changing their minds about Miami at the right time. Obviously, already got a playoff spot. I think they will be a factor in the AFC, especially with how some of the other teams in the AFC have looked this year. So they're certainly a team to watch, as are obviously the Ravens, which we'll get into now, because they have put the NFL on alert, winning the Christmas Monday Night Football battle between the 2 number 1 seeds. And as we spoke about on Friday, their number 1 defense did manage to cause chaos up against an offense that has just looked simply unstoppable since the Niners bye week. I think the defensive coordinator, Mark McDonald, probably won himself a head coaching job last night, with the whole of America watching a potential Super Bowl preview on ABC and ESPN. His unit managed to disrupt Brock Purdy's timing, throwing 3 first-half interceptions. 2 of them were off amazing pass breakups, by the way, but the Ravens were, one of them was in the second half, but the Ravens were only leading by 4 at halftime, with the Niners defense really doing well against Ravens offense, and obviously 3 of their 4 drives ending in Justin Tucker field goals. But it was the Ravens offense that did manage to turn up and turn their opportunities into 7 points in the second half, with Lamar Jackson finding Nelson Aguilar for a TD a few plays before hitting Zay Flowers for another after a 4th interception for the Ravens defense. Another Justin Tucker field goal put Ravens up by 3 scores, a deficit that was simply too large with the way their defense was playing the rest of the game. It was the Ravens defense was just excellent. It was Marcus Williams who pulled in the 5th interception for McDonald's defense minutes ago, picking off Sam Darnold, who replaced a hurt Purdy late on, and that was it for the Ravens, winning against the Niners on a huge Monday Night Football game on Christmas Day. It's what a game from the schedule makers to put on Christmas Day, and obviously it was a surprise winner as well. So it was brilliant. But it's weird for me, suddenly seeing Lamar Jackson as the MVP favourite just because the Ravens won this game, because they didn't win this game because of Lamar Jackson. They won it because of their defense. They intercepted the ball 5 times. They had 4 sacks. They were just all over the Niners offense, which has been unstoppable all season, well, at least since their bye week. It was the Ravens defense that won that game last night. I've seen Lamar have tons of better games than that. I think he had about 10 of those in his MVP season. I get there's no clear winner this year, especially at the quarterback position for MVP, and Brock Purdy had a bad game. But, it's like, I just feel like you can't really give it to him either after that game, because the Ravens won this game because of their defense. Especially if the Dolphins beat the Ravens on Sunday, I wonder who will be favourite then. Will it be Tyreek Hill? Will it be Tua because they beat the Ravens? It's just, it's changing so much after one win. I really wonder how voters are going to react. I think you're going to see the probably closest battle for MVP we've ever seen, perhaps. I say it every week. Christian McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill have been twice as good as any quarterback this season. This is the year that a non-QB wins MVP for the first time in about 10 years. There's been no standout quarterback. And yes, Lamar last night was good. But he scored 2 touchdowns off about 5 or 6 opportunities, and one obviously with a short field as well. He wasn't that impressive. It wasn't an MVP performance on Lamar Jackson. That's how I feel. I mean, yes, again, He's been very good this year. A top 10, top 5 QB, probably top 5, up there with obviously with Dak and Brock Purdy and Tua and probably Josh Allen. They'll be my 5 this year. But you can't give an MVP off that one game, because he didn't win it for them. It was a defense that won that game, disrupting Brock Purdy's timing, and really, taking away a lot of the stuff they like to do in the middle of the field. That's what won that game for the Ravens on Christmas Day. And then we'll go into some final reactions. Obviously, as for the Niners, I think they were actually quite unfortunate, because obviously 2 interceptions were tipped. They didn't count as turnover-worthy plays on PFF's grades. Brock Purdy is fine too. It's good he's not injured. He was just pulled off being shaken up as a bit of precaution. But yeah, I think last night they probably showed that everything, when not perfect, when everything's not perfect, they can be beaten. They are beatable. And Purdy does struggle when that is when that is the case, as do a lot of quarterbacks. When he wants to take away the number one weapon, and wants the middle fields once the middle of the field's not as clear, and you're not getting the yards off the catch that you normally do, or you're not running the ball as well as you normally do either. It is difficult to win football games. But luckily for them, I think they're so talented. I don't think it happens often. And for me, they're probably still Super Bowl favourites. Obviously, they lost Trent Williams to a groin injury in this game as well, which is the reason why they couldn't really get the offense going. It may change if his groin injury keeps him out for some time, but for me, I wouldn't overreact. I think the Niners are still the best team in the NFL. They were just frustrated by the Ravens' defense, and they've now got the film that if they play them in the Super Bowl again, I think the result will be a bit different if they were to play in the Super Bowl again and do a Super Bowl rematch of the blackout game in 2012. But great game. Obviously, I think these two teams are two of the top 3 or 4 teams in the league. And I think it may not be the last time we see them this season. But for me, Ravens defense, outstanding, number 1 defense for a reason. And I don't overreact. I wouldn't overreact too much about the Niners. I think they're still one of the best teams in the league. And they just had an off day, unfortunately. As did the Kansas City Chiefs, who lost on Christmas Day, the first game on Christmas Day, with the Raiders winning at Arrowhead and giving them the Chiefs nightmares. This was just not a great game of football at all, was it? But it did come alive in the second quarter, which is what I want to talk about, because the Chiefs had the lead with 5 minutes to go in the first half, but they gave away 2 defensive touchdowns in quick succession, a fumble, then a pick 6, and that was pretty much the game for the Raiders. 2 snaps, they were 7 seconds apart. The Raiders scored, obviously, 2 defensive touchdowns from those 2 snaps. And then we were just waiting and waiting for the Chiefs to come back and win this one, as they have done so many times. And it never happened. Harrison Butker missed a field goal just before the half after a cool fake punt from Tommy Townsend, meaning the Raiders were up 17-7 at half-time. And that was the Chiefs' only 7 points until they made it a 1-score game at 20-14 with a Justin Watson touchdown just before the 2-minute warning in the fourth quarter. The thought of a comeback victory was quickly waved away, though, after Zamir White pulled off a 43-yard run shortly afterwards to seal the win for the Raiders, which creates an amazing stat, which is that Aidan O'Connell, obviously the Raiders' rookie quarterback, didn't complete a pass from the first quarter, 3 minutes left to go in the first quarter, until the very end of the game, and his team won the game. That's just how bad the Chiefs' offense were in this game. It's just so strange. We've all been waiting for them to just turn it around and get back to the team that they've been since 2018. Obviously, we expected them to struggle last year, and they didn't. They looked great last year without Tyreek Hill, with an older Travis Kelce. This year, obviously, Kelsey's progressed a little bit, but they've also, they've not managed to get the same production out of the receivers that they did last year. The offensive line has not been as good either. Obviously, they've missed Isaiah Pacheco to injuries and stuff at running back as well. But they've just not had the same buzz. It feels like there's some deeper issue with this Chiefs team. Maybe Taylor Swift's a distraction, maybe it's something else. I don't know, but they just seem different. They seem dysfunctional on offense, and I never thought I'd say that about an Andy Reid team. Especially with Patrick Mahomes as a quarterback, it is so weird. I just don't get it. I really don't. Obviously, you have to give credit to the Raiders too. Fair play to them. I've been hyping up their defense for the last 10 weeks or so, and they won them this game today. They were excellent again, which makes you wonder about what happens with Antonio Pierce. Obviously, their interim head coach. He is 4-3 in his time as head coach, and I wonder, if they offer him the permanent job, as they should have done probably after Rich Bisaccia took the Raiders to the playoffs a couple of years ago. I honestly think he should be off the job at this point, because the Raiders have just been had a new lease of life since Josh McDowns was fired. They've looked great. The defense is playing really well as well, and obviously he's never been a head coach before. He's one of those leaders. He's a leader. Obviously, won Super Bowls and stuff. If he can get a good coaching staff behind him, I think it might be a good idea to hire him. They're actually still in the shout of the playoffs too. They're not dead by any means, and in fact they're actually more likely to make it than the Broncos. I think beat them and win against the Colts next week, and the Raiders are actually in the playoffs probably, which I don't think we'd be saying a couple of weeks ago. But fair play to them. Yeah, Pierce has sort of started a turnaround, and they managed to beat the Chiefs at Arrowhead, which, as a lot of teams know, is very, very difficult to do. So, fair play to them for doing that. Another team that are pretty much in the playoffs right now are the Cleveland Browns. Their postseason status is pretty much all but confirmed with their win over the Houston Texans, where Amari Cooper set a Browns franchise record 265 yards in this one, breaking Josh Gordon's record from his stunning 2012 season. This is Cooper's third different team with a 200-yard game. Obviously, the the Cowboys and the Raiders, the other two teams, and he's just a truly underrated player, isn't he? He's such a good player, and obviously being on the third team now, it's mad to think that he was the Browns acquired him for a 5th round pick, because he has been absolutely excellent this year, as has Joe Flacco since coming in. Obviously, he's the 4th quarterback to win a game for the Browns this year. He was decent again. It's a great story. I think he fits this Browns team. They're so injured. They've been so written off, but they're just still going out there and playing defense, running the ball well, and winning games. As they were when everyone else was healthy. It's remarkable. Flacco was PFF's best quarterback on Sunday with a 91.5 grade after putting up 368 yards and 3 touchdowns, with one of his 2 interceptions being a shot to the end zone as clock expired before half-time too. It was Case Keenum who started opposite him for the Texans, with C.J. Stroud not suiting up again for them, with him still in concussion protocol. We saw lots of Davis Mills too, a bit like the end of last year, with Mills and Jeff Driscoll interchanging. It's quite cool. I like how I think teams should do that more often, especially if they're not if they're missing their main quarterback. Just try and get some cool offensive plays out of it. But unfortunately for them, with the loss, their playoff probability has taken a hit to 37%. Because and at the start of the day it was a lot higher than that, and it's been as high as 61% this year. But they're still firmly within a shot at not only the World Cup but also the division after the Jags dip in form. Everybody lost yesterday other than Cleveland and Buffalo. Also obviously everyone lost on Christmas Day, other than Cleveland and Buffalo. It's just about who gets a final spot, really. For Houston, it'll be nice if they can get in this year. It's unlikely, it's less likely than it was at the start of Christmas Eve. But I think they're by far the most entertaining team of the bunch that are trying to get in. Unfortunately for them, I think they're just so injured, and it's an interesting scenario now going into the last couple of weeks. They've got winnable games, but as for what they do, it's an interesting one, because they're looking great for the future. And CJ Stroud, obviously, he's probably don't want to risk him. So we'll see what happens there. But they're certainly a great team to watch, and they'll win. They'll get to an AFC Championship game within the next couple of years. I think just an out prediction. I think D'Amico Ryans is unfortunate not to win Coach of the Year. Obviously, I think it will be Kevin Stefanski, especially after beating Ryans in this game. But he's been absolutely excellent. So the Browns. So hats off to Kevin Stefanski. Okay, we'll go over to Sunday Night Football now, the Christmas Eve Sunday night game taking America into Christmas Day, where the New England Patriots hurt the Denver Broncos' playoff hopes in a Christmas Eve Sunday Night Football shock. Chad Ryland's 56-yard field goal with 7 seconds left sealed the game for the Patriots. But it was Denver who had the lead in the first half. But unfortunately for them, after 20 unanswered points, including a fumble recovery for a touchdown, the Patriots won the game. Note that was the difference. That third quarter, the Broncos scored 16 unanswered points in the fourth quarter in response to tie the game, but that third quarter killed them, with Bailey Zappi, who had a very good game, producing one more drive of offense to hurt Denver in the fourth quarter, setting up that Ryland field goal. Obviously Denver as well is very unfortunate to lose that game as well, because they would have been extra motivated by almost every result going their way in the main state on Christmas Eve too. Had they won that game, it would have been looking very good for them. But unfortunately now their playoff percentage lies at 4%. A real big swing for the Broncos with this loss. Unfortunately, Buddy Zappi was actually PFF's second highest graded quarterback on Sunday, which is just mental. I never thought I'd say that. 88.9, which I never thought I'd see from this Patriots offense this year. It's been a hot mess. Unfortunately for them, it's been a very hot mess for the Patriots, as I said. They've actually looked pretty good last couple of weeks in offense, and fair play for Zappi. To Zappi, he was excellent in this game. As with Denver, before the game, the playoffs were looking, a decent prospect for them, as I said earlier. But after this loss, they stand just at 4% chance at getting in the playoffs at 7 and 8. They've probably just hit a stump at the wrong time these last couple of weeks, and as I said just a minute ago, it's unlikely they'll get in right now, which is a shame, because if anything, it's the Raiders who'll get in, and a couple of weeks ago, Peyton and Wilson and the Broncos were just rolling, and I'm sure Charlie Grace, obviously our resident Full 10 Yards at Broncos fan, is gutted about this, but I think next year for them is the year they really go and push on, because they've got a lot of resources to do so next year. Okay, as for the Patriots, obviously, isn't it convenient that they've started playing good football as soon as it looks like Bill Belichick is out the building? Just a thought to leave you in this game. Just a thought. It's just very, very convenient, isn't it? Obviously I think he'll go, but I think they maybe they're motivated because it's now been confirmed that Belichick will leave. But the Patriots are winning, which as a team of a fan of a team in the AFC East, I don't mind, because it probably hurts their chances of getting a good quarterback. So I'm sure Patriots fans aren't very happy at the fact that they're winning games at the minute. But they're playing hard for Belichick at the minute, which again we've not seen at points this season. Okay, we'll go over to an all Florida matchup between the Jags and the Bucs, where the Jags would dominated by Tampa in this one. They've lost their fourth straight game now, all to teams with winning records too, which is not great for them potentially going into the playoffs. As a rushed back, Trevor Lawrence was sidelined for the third time in that stretch too. He's battled ankle sprains and a concussion, and quite frankly, he didn't look right throwing the football in this one as well. I don't think they should have brought him back in this game. Obviously, having a QB start the week after suffering a concussion is mental in the first place. And I think, he just didn't look right in this one. And then he left the game before the fourth quarter with a sprained AC joint in his shoulder. And it's now uncertain whether he'll be able to play this week coming now as well, which is just horrible news for Jaguars fans. As for the Bucs, they are great again. They've hit form at the right time, which is great for Todd Bowles, who was on the hot seat for a lot of the season. But the Bucs have been excellent the last couple of weeks. And they now have an 84% chance of winning the division, with the Saints and Panthers to close out the year for them. So, win that Saints game to win the division, and obviously the Panthers are there as well. But for them, the Bucs are pretty much in the playoffs, and led by Baker Mayfield, who was great again. He definitely will start somewhere next year, whether it's Tampa Bay, I don't know. It makes sense for him to return, obviously, but I don't know if he'll want to come back without Mike Evans, who is probably going to be leaving the Bucs. So if Baker can get himself a job somewhere else, maybe the Raiders, maybe the Vikings, so it'd be awesome to see him, or many other teams, maybe the Falcons, something like that. I'd love to see Baker, play this well again next year, because he's been excellent this year. Again, I think he probably has been a top 15, maybe top 10 quarterback this year with his play, which we didn't think we'd see at the start of the season, did we? Fair play to Baker. It just shows if you get him an offensive line, he's a good quarterback, and I think the Browns are probably regretting moving on from him right now. If you look at how everything else has gone on for him and for them since the since moving on from him. Evans was great again, another 2 touchdowns on an 86-yard day 2. We'll finish now with this game. We'll start with the Jags. Obviously, they're trending down. The offensive line is rubbish. The receivers are hurt. The defense is not creating the turnovers it was at the start of the year. And Trevor Lawrence is hurt, which is which is not ideal at all, especially as he also led the team in rushing this game. So, if I was to guess who wins the division right now, I think it would be the Texans if Stroud comes back. If not, maybe the Colts with how easy the schedule is, but they didn't look great this week either, which we'll get into later. So, I'm really not confident as to who wins this division. So they're still favourites, but their likelihood of doing that has come right down. And obviously Lawrence's status is uncertain too. Okay, we'll go over to the NFC now. We'll go over to the NFC North, where the Lions won their first ever NFC North title, their first division title in 30 years as well, beating the division rival Vikings in one of the games of the week. The last division title was obviously the NFC Central title in 1993, when Tampa Bay was actually in the division. The Vikings made them work for it though. It was a 2-score game at one point, but the game came down to the very end where Ifiatu Melifonwu, the Lions defensive back, jumped in front of Justin Jefferson at the goal line to seal the win for the Lions. Despite that, Jefferson actually did still leave his mark on this game, catching balls from his third quarterback of the season, and he's missed 7 games too, which is mental. He had 141 yards and a touchdown, and KJ Osborne had a game too of 95 yards and another touchdown. The Lions offense was back on song again, carrying on from last week's big win over the Broncos, and for the second straight week they did it against a good defense as well, because Brian Flores' Vikings defense has really caused some teams problems this year. But the Lions defense doesn't exactly fill me with much confidence at all heading into the playoffs, because they let Nick Mullins throw for 411 yards against them, and it sounds like he might be benched for Jaron Hall going into the next game for the Vikings, which just says it already. So the Lions defense doesn't exactly fill me with confidence, but at least they're in the playoffs, and hopefully they can end that 32-year streak without a playoff win. Obviously, it's a shame for the Vikings that Kirk Cousins got hurt this year. I would have loved to see him in this team, obviously with their defense they've got to, because this is by far the best Vikings defense they've had. I think they've had since the team that got to the NFC Championship team game, definitely in 2017. But I think this Vikings team is just it's a quarterback away, I think, from looking very good in the NFC. And I don't know if they're going to make it. They still can make it, but I think the Packers have probably got the easier schedule. And obviously the NFC South teams play each other too. So I'd probably say they're probably out of the playoffs. And especially without Jordan Allison, who's sprained an ankle in this one. He's week to week. And TJ Hawkinson, who is out for the year after a torn ACL and MCL in this loss to the Lions too. So I doubt they make it, if I'm being honest. Right, we'll stay in the NFC North and we'll go over to the Packers now, who just squeezed out the Carolina Panthers 33-30. And this one turned out to be a fun one, didn't it? Obviously, it's not the shootout game that we expected this week. I think we expected the last one to be the shootout game, or maybe or maybe the Seahawks Titans game, which we'll get into later. But it was brilliant. Bryce Young looked good again, but the Packers got it done. They kept the playoff hopes alive, especially with a lot of results going their way too. They nearly lost it though, and as predicted on Friday, Carolina did come to play. Bryce Young had another strong week. I'm not sure whether it was him or Joe Barry's defense playing down to a QB again. Or a continuation from last week where Bryce Young looked good. I guess there's a bit of both. But PFF are leaning towards Bryce, who was the 4th best passer this week, the 3rd best on Sunday. He's a back-to-back strong grades, 78.0 to 82.0, and he's really looking good at the right time, which is good for the Panthers going into next year. The Packers were up by 2 touchdowns at half-time, and they only scored 1 the rest of the game. Which allowed the Panthers to grow into the game and eventually tie it with 2 DJ Chark touchdowns in the 4th quarter. And also thrown by Jordan Jordan Love on the back foot to Dontavian Wicks, then put the Packers into field goal range, and Angus Carlson made the field goal, leaving 0 timeout Carolina with very little time to respond. They actually got into field goal range, but they ran out of time to clock the ball, which pretty much gave, obviously, they ran out of time, so it gave the Packers the win. But yeah, they're very, very close to losing this game. Obviously, well done to Packers. The run game looked good too, which is encouraging for them. They got the win done, which again is brilliant, especially with results going their way. And I think they've got a good chance of getting into the playoffs. I think they're probably the most likely of the 7 and 8 teams to get in. But obviously they have to win out, and they have to hope the results with the Rams and the Seahawks go their way too. And then as for Carolina, obviously despite losing, a very good set of games for Bryce Young. And next year they've got some good film on him too, for the next head coach and offensive coordinator. Okay, we'll stay in the NFC. We'll go for an NFC East game between the Giants and the Eagles, who contested a fun shootout on Christmas Day where the Philadelphia Eagles ended the 3-game losing streak. With the Cowboys lost to Miami, the Eagles have now reclaimed the lead of the NFC East and suddenly have a shot at the 1 seed again after the Niners lost to the Ravens. But they weren't exactly convincing again, especially at the end, edging out the Giants on the final play of the game. The Eagles were up 20-3 at half-time, but gave the Giants and Tyrod Taylor, who replaced Tommy DeVito at half-time due to poor play, they gave them short field position after Boston Scott and Olamide Zaccheaus ran into each other on a kickoff return, which then led to Saquon Barkley going in for a touchdown. And it was suddenly a 2-point game at the end of the at the end of the third quarter, after Jalen Hurts threw a pick six to Adoree Jackson seconds before. Time ticked over to the fourth quarter. The Eagles then scored 10 unanswered points, but allowed a 69-yard Darius Slayton touchdown and could only respond to that with a field goal, allowing the Giants one more possession, needing 8 points to take the game to overtime. Unfortunately for the Giants, the game ended on a Keely Ringo interception, securing the victory for the Eagles. But that was a close one for them, and they really need to butt their ideas, because they showed yet again that they can't play a complete game of football. And without a good start, especially like they did in this one, they are totally beatable. They do worry me. But they do have one of the best rosters in the league, so they do turn up and win games sometimes. It's just fascinating stuff. I just don't know who this Eagles team are. I can see them getting into the NFC Championship game, but I don't trust them to win a game against the Giants. So it's just some weird scenario. I just never seen this before. They're so talented. And everything. But yeah, if I'm the Giants, I fancy an upset going into their Week 18 game, especially with it being in New York as well. What they're obviously be hoping for is that Philly have got something to play for in that game too. So we'll see how they get on against Jonathan Gannon's Cardinals next week. Obviously that game is in Philly, but yeah, maybe the Cardinals do something. Okay, we'll remain in the NFC with Seattle, who beat the Tennessee Titans 20-17, just about getting it done against Ryan Tannehill's Titans to win the second straight game and bounce back into a wildcard spot below the Rams. Tannehill started in place of Will Levis, who couldn't recover from his ankle injury in time. Obviously, it was the one he suffered in overtime against the Texans last week. And this game was just a scrappy game, especially in the first half, but it got fun in the fourth quarter, with 16 points scored in the first 3 periods and 21 in the fourth one. Seattle spent a lot of the game trailing, had the second straight game-winning drive, this time led by Geno Smith, not Drew Lock, who started in this one, who, again, is their number one quarterback, but I think Drew Lock has played impressive in his last 2 games. He fit it in there to Colby Parkinson, who looked like Jesus, for a TD on Christmas Eve. It was just written in the stars. But they did leave time on the clock. Unfortunately for Tennessee, Draymond Jones sacked Ryan Tannehill before he threw a pass in bounds, which ran down the clock for Tennessee. It's just an absolute mess. And it's like the Green Bay game. This game could have gone very south for Seattle, but it swung in their favour, and they now have a 69% chance of making the playoffs, and are pretty much in if they beat Pittsburgh next week. It was less than half that percentage a few days ago before their game on Monday Night Football against the Eagles. So, what a week to be a Seahawks fan. And Geno Smith looked really good in his return too, so that's awesome for them going into the playoffs too. Okay, we've got 3 games to finish out. These games, they could say it's pretty bad teams. But the next one, they're not bad, but they're 2 teams that I just don't know who they are, because the Falcons stay alive with Taylor Heineke at QB, preventing the Colts from taking the lead of the AFC South with a win at home in Atlanta. This game may have saved Arthur Smith's job because Taylor Heineke was way better than Desmond Ridder, and they got Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts involved too. Bijan had 122 yards in this one. Tyler Algier had 88 and a touchdown, and Kyle Pitts had 49 yards and a touchdown too. But it was their defense that stood out in this one. They are mega again. They've never been in the issue. The Jesse Bates interception in pretty much still the game for the Falcons, who went down and scored 3 more points. Bates has been great all year. What an addition for them. And I want to see the Falcons team with a good coach and a good quarterback. I think that'd be great. But whether we see that next year or not, I don't know. But for the Colts, despite the loss, they still remain in the wildcard places as a 7 seed after Buffalo overtook them. And with their schedule, they're probably still favourites to claim that last spot. They just. But it's weird because they just didn't look good in this. I just don't know what to expect from them. I think Charlie Grace summed it up in our Full 10 Yards chat this week. He said, just after you start to trust them, the Colts, they go and look like that. I think that pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? Just after you start to trust them, they go and look like that, and you really don't know who they are. But they could quite easily claim the division. That game against the Texans in Week 18 could be huge. It could be for the AFC South title. As for the Falcons, obviously they could sneak in as a wildcard team should they fail to win the division, but they're gonna have to win out. But yeah, maybe they win the division, but it's looking quite unlikely now. But at least they got a win. Probably has saved Arthur Smith's job until the end of the year anyway. Okay, we'll go over to Chicago, where Justin Fields shone in the battle of the former first-round quarterbacks, both of them under pressure, of course, Kyler Murray and Justin Fields, both of them looking for jobs, but it was either this job they're in now right now or a new job next year. But another game for Justin Fields has made Chicago's decision even harder. The Bears led from start to finish with, once again, some awesome stuff offensively. It just baffles me why it took 10 or so weeks to come out, because, the staff has already been fired, basically. That we all know they're gone. They just haven't actually been fired. But this is the offense they had last year, which gave everyone so much hope going into this year with Justin Fields at quarterback. They had 250 yards on the ground. Fields had 97, backing up his 100-yard game from last time out. And Khalil Herbert had 112 yards on the ground too. And their defense has been ace too lately. I just don't understand why they were so bad at the start of the season, and now they're looking at one of the hottest teams in the league. It's just so weird. I just don't get it. The run game and the defense made this a comprehensive win for the Bears from start to finish. And it looked good in their throwbacks too. The ones with the stripy socks and the stripy sleeves as well. They look awesome. Some of the best jerseys in the NFL. As me and Ollie Darcy ranked them in at the start of the season. As for the Cardinals, it's weird. The more I read, the more it seems like they want to keep Kyler Murray. But I don't necessarily believe that, especially with another loss for them as well. He was decent again, but he didn't quite have the impact that Fields did in this one, even though he may have a better box score. It was very much a Justin Fields game, and Kyler Murray had a lot of garbage time yards and stuff. I'd keep both of these guys. I love them as quarterbacks. I think they're, I like them over a quarterback. I think they're pieces you can build around, but they've not exactly been in the best situations, have they, in their NFL career, which is why it's such a difficult decision. But I think the smart thing to do for both teams is sit and wait and see what offers you get going into the draft, because there's going to be a lot of QB movement in this offseason, so you might get a really good offer. But yeah, I personally, unless I get a good offer, I would keep both of those guys, because I think if you give them an offensive line or some weapons, I think they can be very good quarterbacks. And that's the other thing as well. Get off both of them. Obviously, the Cardinals need to keep their offensive coordinator around, because I really do like what he's called this year, especially with Josh Dobbs and everyone. And then the Bears need to get an offensive coach. That is a must for them. They need to get an offensive coach. And then we'll finish off with the game that we were all looking forward to, the 32nd ranked Washington Commanders defense against the 32nd ranked New York Jets offense. And it was the Jets offense that just won this game. But it's weird for them, because Trevor Siemian's Jets, by the way, because Zach Wilson couldn't pass concussion protocol in time, they nearly blew a 20-point lead to the Jacoby Brissett-led Commanders team. But Greg Zuerlein saved the day to secure a 30-28 win as time expired for the Jets. And the reason why it was a Brissett-led Commanders team, obviously, is because Sam Howell was pulled for the second straight game, and Brissett was excellent in relief again, leading basically taking a 28-7 game to a 28-27 game before the Jets scored that winning field goal. The Jets were up 17-0 within 6 minutes before their defense did their thing to Howell. He looked terrible after that. I've liked Howell this year, but the last 2 weeks he's not been good, which is just a weird thing going into next year. Maybe they do go for a different quarterback. As for the Jets offensively, well, they got Brees Hall going, which was a huge factor for them. 20 carries for 95 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't really know what else I can say about both of these teams, really. Obviously, for both of them, it's about next year. With the Jets, probably with Salah, especially after the report that the owner wants to keep him and Joe Douglas, the GM, around. And as for the Commanders, it's probably definitely going to be about Ron Rivera. And I'm interested to see who starts at QB for both of these teams next week, because Travis Simeon looked quite good, and obviously Howell's been pulled the last 2 games. Jacoby Brissett stepped in and he's looked really good in both of the games. Obviously, the thing with Washington is that they want to have a better draft pick, and Brissett probably gives them a better chance to win, and they're not playing for anything. So it's just a weird situation. But obviously that game was going to end the podcast this week. What a week it was! It was really fun watching all these games on Christmas Day. I actually really enjoyed going through them when I had a little bit of time off, when I wasn't really interested in watching the telly. A bit of a shorter recap this week, just going through all those games. Christmas, man. It's December, the end of December. Obviously, the next week is the last week of December, the last day of December. And this is when the NFL just gets so tasty. So, I just cannot wait for the Dolphins-Ravens game next week. There's a couple of good games in the other spots as well next week too. But for now, we'll leave week 17 today in the week. This has been our week 16 recap. Again, I hope everyone's had a very good Christmas. I certainly did. It's always great watching the NFL at Christmas, but obviously I didn't watch the games last night because I wanted to enjoy it with my family. But watching the games this Boxing Day after coming back from Bristol City, beating Watford 4-1. We had to throw that in there. That was an awesome game. The best Bristol City I've looked in probably about 5 years, I'd say. After coming back, I've just sat down and watched these games, and I was pleasantly surprised by how competitive all three were. Because they obviously the Ravens Niners game looked great, but the other 2 games did look a bit naff. But they're certainly a treat for some people on Christmas Day. I'll love you and leave you guys. This has been a Full 10 Yards NFL podcast. I've been your host, Sam Moores, and I will see you again on Friday night for our Week 17 preview. Well, we'll be previewing the big one, the basically battle for the AFC 1 seed between the Baltimore Ravens and the Miami Dolphins. I just cannot wait for it. I will see you then.